When you go swimming in a Maine lake, did you ever wonder what's swimming in there with you?
Oh, look at this little guy. Oh, my God.
Oh, you got the little spinny. What do you see? There's a little spinny. Oh, yeah.
This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine, a show about fun and adventure in the outdoors, much of which takes place on water. There are 783 lakes in Maine, not counting all the ponds that are smaller than 10 acres, or some of those lakes and ponds in the woods that don't even have names. There are 2 lakes that have the name unnamed. There are at least 6,000 bodies of water in the state, larger than 1 acre. We've got a lot of places to boat, fish, swim, and some of those aren't as healthy as they should be. We know because we test. In fact, today's show will test one lake, because today's show is on a boat. There's a lot of stuff in lakes that we put there on purpose and probably shouldn't have. There's a lot more stuff in lakes that we put there by accident. Let's go see. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Doors Equipment, Bar Harbor Whale Watch, Napa Auto Parts, EBS, and a Supercuts location near you. It's Labor Day weekend. Pretty soon, the season for going up to camp will be over. It's estimated that at least half of all Mainers visit and use Maine's lakes, either with a camp or visiting state parks and public beaches or boating. The truth is, Maine's lakes get a lot of use. It's easy to take them for granted. They've been here since the last ice age, but keeping them clean enough to use is no easy task. In most lakes, water quality isn't what it once was. Some lakes suffered from the effects of wood and sawdust left in the water during the days when logs were floated to mills along their banks. Many lakes suffered from septic systems too close to the water. In time, these point sources of pollution abated. But then we learned that non-point source pollution is just as bad. Soil contains phosphorus. And when it runs off the lawn or out through badly designed drainage ditches, it drains into the lake and fuels algae growth. Fertilizer running off into the lake makes it even worse. We've learned a lot about the mess we make, and we've gotten better about it. But we've got a ways to go. In the mid-20th century, lake associations began to form. In 1970, many of them joined in a Congress of Lake Associations. There was also a Maine Lakes Conservancy Institute. Those joined together 4 years ago, and now we have one big group called the Maine Lake Society, and it has about 144 Lake Association members. The Maine Lake Society shares information, lobbies for lake protective legislation, advocates for non-regulatory solutions to runoff problems, and operates a floating classroom. And it is that floating classroom that we're climbing on board right now.
Out to the deep hole and to the shoreline, we do two stations.
Phil Mulville is the chief lake educator, and he has been for a while.
Been working with Maine Lake Society / COLA, then before that it was Maine Lakes Conservancy Institute for 10 years now. And this is my 3rd trip to this lake. And I forgot it was a very shallow lake.
Yes, it is.
The lake is Pushaw Lake. The event is a Pushaw Lake Community Day that happened several weeks ago at Lakeside Landing in Glenburn. Pushaw Lake is a good lake to study because it's a challenging lake to keep clean. The inlet and outlet are both at the north end, meaning the water for much of the lake turns over slowly and pollutants flush out at a snail's pace. It's got a phosphorus load that puts it on the edge of dealing with algae blooms. It's mostly surrounded by full-time and summer homes, many of them old and close to the water, which adds to runoff problems. And most of all, it's shallow.
Well, from Gold's Landing to here, deepest spot I hit was 14.5.
That's about average.
Yeah. And the water temperature is 78.6 right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Backwater.
Bathtub.
The other day I got above 80 on our boat.
Really? Wow.
Some of those hot days.
Degrees in the water.
Warm, shallow water can be prone to algae blooms, something many Maine lakes worry about.
Well, the Belgrade Lakes chain, there's quite a few like East Pond and North Pond. They have a tendency to to bloom. I haven't heard of anything yet because Colby College is also in the same building we are. They have a wet lab there, and they're testing all 7 lakes. The readings are all off this year just because it was such an early spring.
We're on the floating classroom, a 30-foot pontoon boat called the Melinda Ann. We'll take this boat out to a water quality monitoring spot in the middle of the lake and take some readings. Water quality is measured by many things: clarity, temperature, dissolved oxygen, nutrient load, critters, and more recently we've had to really worry about invasive species. The Melinda Ann has all the gear on board for this research, and that's what we're going to go do. We're even going to use a remote-controlled underwater camera and chase some fish around, maybe. Phil gets to play with a lot of toys.
As I said, my name's Phil Mulville. I work for the Maine Lake Society. This boat gets traveled all over the state of Maine, from York all the way up to Aroostook County. And as Clayton, who towed it up here for me yesterday, knows, it's not that fun to tow around because it's boat's 30 feet, the trailer's 35 feet, so you have to think before you stop or turn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about a lot of the gear that I have on board the boat, and then you guys are going to get to use it. I'll talk about the Belgrade chain quite a bit because I live there, and we share the same building, Colby College's wet lab, and a bunch of other agencies, which is kind of nice and handy. What do you think we're going to use this for? Catching things, definitely.
Sediment.
No.
I'd say. Yeah.
Could guess so.
Invertebrates?
Kind of, yeah.
Vertebrates?
We're going for plankton. And most people don't realize that there's plankton also in freshwater. What are the 2 types of plankton?
Fido. Fido is one of them, right?
Fido is right. And the other one begins with a Z.
Zoo.
Zooplankton. There you go. Zooplankton.
Zoo.
Zooplankton. So you tell the kids, where do you go to see animals? Zoos. So zooplankton, they catch on quickly.
Which is plant.
Yep. So plants and animals. Plants obviously need the big yellow thing in the sky, the sun. So they're going to be up near the surface. The zooplankton, on the other hand, is down deeper. Now, the reason they're down deeper is because when we catch them, you guys will be able to see them with your eyes. Right? So if we can see them with our eyes, who else do you think in the lake can see them? Fish. You don't have salmon or any trout at all in here?
Nope.
No.
Bass.
Pretty much warm water.
Yeah, it's bass.
We do have
Pickerel.
alewives, too.
Okay. Well, even when perch, when they're small, their basic diet is zooplankton. In a cold water species lake, it's the salmon and the trouts. When they're young, it's their basic diet. But you also now have, unfortunately, you have pike in here.
Yep.
I know. I live on Great Pond, where they first were introduced. So we don't have a salmon population anymore, unfortunately. So if we can see them, the fish can see them. The only time that zooplankton are going to come up and feed on the phytoplankton is early morning when the sun's at its lowest, and late in the afternoon they'll come up. Because if they come up during the day, they'll just get chowed on. And I've been on board here with our board of directors one time, and we were doing a plankton tow, and my fish finder and depth finder started going off, and it was a huge school of white perch going underneath the boat. Put the plankton tow down, brought it up, and we had absolutely nothing in it. They just went right through and ate everything.
Like vacuum cleaners.
Yeah, it was just like a Hoover, just sucked them right up. But you need a good balance of both zooplankton and phytoplankton. East Pond a couple years ago in the Belgrade chain, they were having major problems with algae blooms. And I don't know if you've ever seen an algae bloom. It kind of looks like your coat. And the smell is horrific. I mean, it's horrible. What was happening there is there was a stunted population of white perch. They're only getting about this big, and they were chowing on all the zooplankton. So the phytoplankton was just blossoming. So DEP and IF&W went in and they netted out, I think, 15,000 tons or 18,000 tons of fish. It wasn't just perch, because when you put out a gill net, it's going to catch whatever. They composted it all. And since then, the algae blooms have diminished. They haven't completely, they're not gone, but they've they're getting it's getting better. Yeah. I was on North Pond like 2 days after an algae bloom, and we sent this down and brought it back up, and the smell, because all of it just sank to the bottom, was just horrible. And we had nothing. We had no zooplankton or phytoplankton. But the incredible thing is, see how fine this mesh is? The phytoplankton goes right through it. Okay, we can't really see it, except one exception. It's a colony of phytoplankton called volvox, and it looks like a almost like a green dandelion head. If we see it on the screen, you'll know it. Do you have gliotrichia in this lake? Do you know?
Not sure.
Okay. It would kind of look like tapioca in the water.
Time for a short break. We're on the Melinda Ann, a 30-foot pontoon boat that serves as a floating classroom for the Maine Lake Society. We've motored out to the middle of Pushaw Lake, and we're about to play with gear to measure the water quality of the lake. Education Director Phil Mulville is walking us through it. We'll start getting our hands dirty when Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine returns in a moment on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. Welcome back to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. We're on a boat, and the boat is on Pushaw Lake. We left the dock in Glenburn a few minutes ago. The boat is a 30-foot floating classroom from the Maine Lake Society. And we've got Phil Mulville, Education Director, showing us all the toys on board. This is how scientists study water quality in a lake. First thing we'll look at is critters, little animal plankton that eat little plant plankton that should be down towards the bottom of the lake right in the middle of the day now to avoid being eaten by bigger critters. That's what this gizmo in front of us does.
What we'll do is we'll take a sample, we'll put it down, can't go below 25 feet, so we'll hit the bottom. We'll go down about 18 feet and bring it back up. And right here, I have a Kenavision, which just enlarges everything. And right here I've got a monitor, so you'll be able to see it a whole lot easier. But as soon as we bring it up and we pour it into the sample, you'll be able to see if anything's zipping around. So this we'll do off the bow of the boat. But no, I'm going to talk about two other things. We'll have three things going on at the same time.
So the fine screening net we'll use to get some tiny critters. The second thing is a round disc that is painted white and black. You basically lower it into the water and measure how far down you can see it. That measures water quality. It's a Secchi disc, spelled after the Italian inventor Angelo Secchi. That's Secchi.
And the funny thing is the kids always say it always comes out the Secchi disc. It's the Secchi disc. Does anyone know how this was discovered?
Joe Secchi, I presume.
Well, your Giuseppe Secchi was actually hired by the Pope in the 1700s, I believe, from what Pete says, and the Pope hired him to go around and find the cleanest lake so he could build a house on the cleanest lake. And he was out on one of the lakes and having his lunch and had a white plate, and it fell overboard, and he just kind of watched it flip all the way down, and it disappeared. So he got the idea of tying a rope to one, and he lowered it down, and that's how it started. It's obviously changed a whole lot since then. You've got a weight to it now, and it's black and white. What do we use this for? Ren?
Clarity.
Okay, clarity. There we go. Turbidity. Basically, it's like taking the blood pressure of a lake. And the funny thing is, when I talk about this on other lakes, I always mention Pushaw because your water has got a coloration to it, kind of like iced tea color. So, I know on East Pond this spring, they lowered it down that far in June, and that Secchi just disappeared. That's not good. That's early June. But it's gotten better since then. So when you tell kids, if it disappears at this depth, is that a healthy lake? And they all say, of course not. No, it's not. But here, your average, from what Rich said, is 3 meters. Something in that range. Yeah.
Depends on how much.
The clarity is not the greatest on the lake, but your water quality is actually fairly good because around, as you guys know, there are a lot of bogs and swamps, which actually help filter the water out. They're almost like a sponge. so they can collect all the bad thing. Now take Lake Tahoe. Has anybody ever been on Lake Tahoe here?
Been by it.
Been by it, okay.
By it, yeah.
A gentleman who I used to work with on this boat, he went out there for a conference, and their Secchi disc is about the size of a lid of a trash can, and it went down about 75 feet. Water clarity is phenomenal, but the water quality there is not that good. Every year they have to stock it with fish. In the past couple of years, they've had the quaggy mussel and the zebra mussel invasives introduced into the lake. So it's not all the clarity of the water, it's the quality.
Well, that's an interesting distinction. Pushaw Lake has a lot of stuff in it. The water is brown, so you might think the water is dirty. But there are lots of critters. There are some crystal clear lakes in the world that can't even support life. They're too clean, or in a few cases poisonous, which explains the lack of critters. Anyway, this is the second test of Pushaw's water quality. We'll lower this foot-wide white and black disc into the water and measure how far down we can see it. And by we, I mean two other people besides me. Bill and Mary Phillips of Hudson, who live on Pushaw, have got the disc now.
Now, this is usually it's done by one person, because this around the state right now, this happens twice a week or twice a month. Each lake has, not every lake gets monitored, but a good portion of the lakes do. Some lakes have one station. You guys have two?
Three.
Oh, yeah. They usually do the deep holes.
Well, we have a station in Low Pushaw, too.
Oh, okay.
They have been taking some samples at the south end of the lake, but that's not regularly.
Yeah. Oh, that's not an official station.
Okay, it's not an official site. Yeah, in Great Pond, we've got the two deepest holes on either side of Hoyt's Island.
So they take the Secchi, temperature, dissolved oxygen, and then collect a water sample for phosphorus.
And they go to the same spot every time. It's all GPS'd in now. I'm going to have two people doing this. One person is going to be using the aquascope, and the reason we use this, trying to look into the water down into it right now, you've got ripples and you've got kind of a little glare off the lake with the sun. So this end goes down into the water, and your face goes right in here. And this person will lower it down, and this person, when they can't see it, is going to tell you to stop and then bring it up a bit. And when they can see it again, they'll tell you, then lower it back down. And then when they say stop, the person with the Secchi disc is going to look on the tape measure to see what depth it was. And if we were actually doing real data, we'd do meters. Kids sometimes get confused with meters, and so whatever they tell me, I can convert. It's not a problem.
So when you have youngsters on the boat, do you generally have as captive an audience?
Yes. I mean, you play with the kids. You got to play with the kids. Because if you don't, they're going to get bored and kind of mess with you a little bit.
I'm married to a guy like that.
I'm already bored. Phil Mulville is Education Director for the Maine Lake Society. We're in the middle of Pushaw Lake, which is surrounded by Orono, Old Town, Hudson, and Glenburn. Today's show is about taking care of our lakes. We've got a lot of them. And they aren't just places where we live and recreate. They are a surprisingly big part of our economy. They generate more than $3.5 billion annually in economic activity and provide over 52,000 jobs. We counted them for drinking water, fishing, and outdoor adventure. Almost every Mainer has a canoe, and many have powerboats. So scientists and citizen scientists actually keep an eye on our lakes to make sure they're not declining. Unfortunately, some are. Mostly due to mistakes we made with development along the shoreline that has increased runoff and the phosphorus load into our lakes. Fortunately, we're getting smarter about it. Lake smart. So we're on a 30-foot pontoon boat lowering 3 pieces of test equipment into the water. We've got a net off the bow to catch plankton and small critters. We've got a Secchi disc going down to measure clarity. And we've got that third thing we haven't told you about yet. That's next on Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine as it continues on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. Saturday mornings at 9, Sunday mornings at 8 on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. Maine has got so much water that other states can only look at us with envy. We've got lakes and ponds and rivers and streams everywhere. We've got places to live and play all over the map. It'd be easy to take that for granted, and for many years, we did. We don't now. Over the last 100 years, water quality has declined. Over the last 50 years, lake associations have been trying to do something about it. Today, the Maine Lake Society helps get the word out about how to better develop lakefront property, how to avoid using too much fertilizer, which can run off into the lake, and how to build ditches and boat ramps in a way that doesn't degrade water quality. The Maine Lake Society even has a floating classroom to help people get lake smart. We're on that boat today, a 30-foot pontoon boat called the Melinda Ann. We're testing the water quality in Pushar Lake just above Bangor. We're actually lowering 2 pieces of test gear into the water. Education Director Phil Mulville is getting ready to launch the third.
It's got a couple names. It's sometimes called a horizontal water column sampler or a Van Doren bottle. For kids' sake, we just call it the water bottle because it's easy to remember. And if I told one of you guys, if I gave you this and a brick and some rope, could you get water from the bottom of the lake and bring it up?
No.
No.
You can't. This, on the other hand, get in there, you can.
This is a water column sampler. If you want to get a sample of the water at a particular depth, you can't just lower down a bucket. All the water from every depth would get into it. What you need is something that goes down to depth that will close shut and trap the water at that depth you want. This is important because water stratifies. There are different temperatures at different depths, and that affects dissolved oxygen, and that affects what can live in the lake at certain depths. So this handy little device is a tube that opens on both ends, with covers that slam shut when triggered. The trigger is a weight that slides down the string and trips the latch when you get it to the depth you want. You bring that up, and that's a sample of the water you want. So that's what it looks like. Phil Mulville can explain it better.
So what you do is you lower it down to whatever feet you want. Goes down, and this chunk of metal in my hand is what we call the messenger. And what you do is you send it down, send the message.
I love it.
And there you go.
Oh, now you want one.
I want one.
They're not cheap. Well, you can get, there's some ones that they use these ends. They took wiffle balls to make it.
Trigger underneath.
And last year, believe it or not, I had a little kid. He's probably 6 years old. I'd all rigged it for him, and he went down and brought it back up. And then he wanted to do it himself. Next thing you know, he's handing me just this piece right here.
Oh no, he pulled it out.
How did you do that? It's steel cable. He managed to do it somehow, but that's why Jerry rigged it, and it still works. Still have it. This lake, the reason we do this is to show you the stratification of the lake. And it's easier for kids. You just tell them it's, just think of a 3-layer cake. You got the icing in the middle, you got the top and the bottom. Most people will say, when they dive in the water gets really cold as you go down, 5 or 6 or 7 feet. Usually it doesn't. It feels that way because the icing in the middle is what we call the thermocline. And the thermocline is an actual barrier. If you were all sitting in the water right now and a boat went by, if we ducked our heads underwater, we'd hear that motor go by. But if we went down below the thermocline, you don't hear it. It acts as a barrier, and it looks like when saltwater and freshwater mix. Kind of like a hazy, clearish. And I know some friends that are scuba divers. When you swim through it, you can feel it. So it's very unique. This lake, the deepest hole you said is tops
19 feet.
No, it's closer to 30.
Yeah. Close to 30.
Oh, that's right. 29.
Okay.
Yeah.
On shallow lakes, there's sometimes you might get a little stratification maybe in that hole, but in general you don't. Lakes that are deeper, you're going to have a stratification. And the thing is, that thermocline actually acts as a barrier. It will not allow oxygen to go through it.
Okay, that's the scientific stuff. But really, it's all about me. How does this affect my swimming and fishing? If I just look at a lake and think of it as one big puddle of water, I miss a lot of things that tell me whether a lake is healthy. And lake health isn't just about pollutants. It's about the life it can support, and that's determined by the food chain. And that's determined by temperature and dissolved oxygen. And that's often determined by how often and how well this water turns over in a lake, which does affect the fish.
So a lower level of a lake, especially with a cold species, a water species lake, the trout and the salmon, the oxygen they have all summer long is the oxygen they're going to get. And what happens is in the fall, it's called lake turnover, and in early winter when the water temperature drops down to 39 degrees, that's when it sinks. It's when water's at its densest. And it goes down and just flips the whole lake over. And you'll know it, because the lake will look like somebody went out there with an egg beater and beat it all up. It gets very murky, a lot of debris in the water. Then the ice forms, spring comes, ice melts. As the water temperature comes up, hits 39 degrees, flips again. So that's when the lower level of the lake will get its oxygen. Other times it has happened when we've had really big windstorms. It's turned over. Colby College has witnessed this on Great Pond before. We have 3 deep holes, and in one of the holes got rejuvenated. And that's another reason we don't have salmon on Great Pond, is because of the oxygen is gone by the end of July in those 3 holes. And then also the pike didn't help either. So
they tried, I think, at one point putting landlocked salmon in this lake, and I think even trout too, but they couldn't survive.
No, I mean, trout, brown trout can deal with different water temperatures. Brook trout really can't. Salmon, obviously, togue obviously cannot either. But rainbow can also tolerate warmer temperatures. I mean, I was shocked. July 4th weekend, I caught a 8-inch brook trout on Great Pond, and they haven't been stocking them for quite a few years. But there's some streams around there, so it looks like we have a population. Because an 8-inch brook trout I've got lures that big for pike, so it's bait for them basically. So what we'll do is we'll try 2 samples, and we'll test to see what the water temperature varies from the top to the bottom. But normally when you have a stratified lake, once you go through that thermocline, the water drops drastically. It'll drop down to the lower 50s. But from the thermocline up, the water temperature from the surface to the thermocline will vary 3 to 4 degrees maybe. So it's
deep down.
That depends on the lake as well.
On the lake.
Yep. Like Sebago Lake, jumping in Sebago Lake in the middle of summer is cold anyways, because it's the deepest lake in the state at 314 feet. Yeah. I went to camp on Panther Pond, and our sister camp was on Wohila, was on Sebago, so whenever we would go visit and we'd jump in the lake, yeah, it would wake us up. Girls, of course, are like, you guys are wimps. 'Cause our Panther Pond was basically a bathtub. We were in this little cove that was maybe 10 feet deep, so it was bath water all summer long. So, but when you do this there, going below the thermocline, the water temperature, it's such a drastic change. It is incredible. Very shocking, actually. So we'll do that on this side. We'll try to do 2 samples, one at the surface and one down right at the bottom. Hopefully not hit the bottom, but bring it up and we'll feel it. I do have some thermometers somewhere.
Now that we've met the tools we're going to use, let's use them. We'll have a plankton tow lowered off the bow and take it down to about 15 feet to see what kind of critters are down there. We'll lower the Secchi disc into the water to see how far down we can see it, which will give us the water clarity or turbidity. And we'll lower the water column sampler to see if the water below is different than the water on top. We're on a floating classroom, a 30-foot pontoon boat from the Maine Lake Society. We're testing Pushaw Lake to see how healthy it is. And we're going to get some results in a moment. Then, in a few more moments, we've got a remote-controlled underwater cam and some other toys to play with. Stand by. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. It's a show about outdoor fun and adventure in Maine, much of which happens on lakes and streams. Some of those aren't healthy. We've cleaned up most of the septic systems that once ran into the lakes, but we've still got a lot of phosphorus that washes in when soil erodes off the shoreline. Being lake smart means making sure the rain running off the camp roof doesn't rush immediately onto the beach, and boat ramps are well baffled so that gullies don't wash into the lake. It means avoiding fertilizer along the lake edge. Because so many of our lakes are dam controlled, It means watching the water levels to make sure water turns over and bad stuff flushes. Who knew lake health was so much work? We're doing that work now. We're on a 30-foot pontoon boat that serves as a floating classroom for the Maine Lake Society. We're anchored in the middle of Pushaw Lake. And the first test is to see how clear the water is, or isn't. The white and black disc called a Sept disc is being lowered into the water on the port side of the boat right now.
Wait, yeah, keep it on the same side, but just turn it in reverse.
The Sept disc is about a foot in diameter, with triangular patterns of black and white on top.
Okay, now bring it up a little bit. Still see it?
Yep.
Okay, now go back down again. Tell us when you lose it.
Nope. Keep going.
Okay. Coming back.
Water in Pushaw Lake is pretty brown. Normally we can't see much more than about 3 to 4 feet deep.
Let her go?
Yep.
You can see it now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, that's
You can hear it.
Just pull her
3
over.
meters 60.
Now,
3.60.
where are you reading, Rich?
Down at the water line. See,
okay.
see, there's 4 right here. 4, and the 60 was showing.
Water in Pushaw Lake is pretty brown. Normally we can't see much more than 3 to 4 feet deep. Rich Dressler is the guy helping us do this part. He's a retired IFW fish biologist, and he lives on Pushaw Lake, so he knows it all very well. He also knows what to expect out of these water quality tests.
Actually, it's usually about 3 meters a lot of the time. It's 3 something usually, but it depends. Okay, you can bring it up.
How'd we do?
Well, there's something there.
3.6 meters. That's how far down we can see in Pushaw Lake, which is actually a tiny bit better than normal for this lake. Some lakes you can see a long way down. This one you can't. This one is a shallow, warm water lake with lots of nutrients and critters. On the other side of the boat, they've just completed the water column sampler, and as expected, the water 10 feet down is the same temperature as the surface. Pushaw doesn't have any deep holes. The deepest spot is only about 29 feet, and for most of the lake, the water does not stratify. That means there are no cold pockets where trout and salmon can hang out in the summer months. So this lake has lots of warm water fish like small and largemouth bass and, unfortunately, northern pike that some yahoo released in here. It also means that the small plankton can move up and down in the water column without running into any temperature barriers. We've just brought the plankton tow back aboard and poured the sample into a clear plastic dish. Phytoplankton, which is a tiny plant, will just sit there. Zooplankton, which are tiny animals that eat phytoplankton, will move around as we watch.
Oh, look at this little guy. Oh, my God. Oh, you got some.
Oh, you got the little spinny.
So
What do you see?
Was,
There's a little spinny.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. He's going at it. He's got, I can't tell how many.
Is that big one a water mite?
I don't know.
That's what it looked like.
Okay.
Water mites tend to be reddish.
Yeah, this guy has no red.
Yeah, he's no red. I noticed that. But
All right.
that could be.
So am I
because
looking smaller? These little red. Oh, I see little red bits now coming to the.
It also could be since the water is, the tannic acid in it doesn't need to be bright red.
So I might be looking even smaller than that little spider-looking thing. Okay, so I see the red bits that you're describing. I think
If you had a
now.
microscope, you would see.
Oh, we're going to put it on.
Oh, we're putting it there. I'm sure.
Normally we might look at these little critters under a microscope just to see what's in there. But this is a floating classroom, and we've got a generator that powers a video screen so that we can all see what's going on.
Oh, my God. Look at it all.
A lot of that's debris.
Now, under the microscope, we can see lots of little critters moving around in the sample. So far, we've mentioned that there are tiny animal plankton that eat plant plankton. But of course, there's always bigger animal plankton that eat smaller animal plankton. And there's one there.
Has anybody ever seen the show SpongeBob? Or heard about it? Believe it or not, they have a creature in there called plankton, but in real life it's actually called a cyclops. And he goes around and he eats other zooplankton. And he looks exactly like what they drew on the cartoon and in real life.
And is he kind of pinkish red?
Yes, it depends on the lake too.
Oh, got it.
We've got... yeah, it's kind of hard when you're moving in a boat. And of course, this also freaks a lot of people out thinking that they're swimming. There's something right there. He's hopping around. Looks like he's feeding on that. Yes, yep. People think they're going to get this all in their mouth. I'm like, well, your mouth isn't the size of it's not that big.
you did. It's protein.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to hurt you. That's the funny thing.
Is this?
Whoa.
That's that guy. Yeah, there's that. There he is.
Look at that.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
We've now done the 3 tests: clarity, critters, and temperatures. From here, Phil Mulville will motor us over to a more interesting spot closer to the boat launch in Glenburn, where we will use the remote control underwater camera to chase fish and see what's happening in shallower water. Pushaw is interesting for another reason. It's always been a lake at risk of algae blooms. There's about 15 parts per billion of dissolved phosphorus in the water, and under some circumstances that would be enough to cause big problems. One thing that helps is that the darkness of the water may actually prevent sunlight from penetrating too deeply. But this is also a lake where alewives have been reintroduced. Phosphorus gets into the plankton, and alewives then eat the plankton. Retired fish biologist Rich Dressler explains why that might help.
Apparently, the alewives eating these smaller plankton and so forth, take some of the phosphorus into their body and supposedly carry it out to sea, which helps to reduce phosphorus load as well. So even though we're testing the phosphorus level in the lake, we apparently have enough to support algal blooms, but apparently that's not happening. So these may be some of the reasons why.
Yeah, most people don't realize that is naturally found in dirt, gravel.
Well, that's the big push for keeping, not having your lawn go down to the lake.
As you know, lawns don't stop runoff. My house got approved for Lake Smart this year. It's been approved, but I never officially did it, even though I'm a Lake Smart evaluator. I can't evaluate my own property. I'm not allowed to. I don't have any lawn. I haven't had a lawnmower in 12 years. I've got all blueberries. And it's 50 feet from the house to the lake.
Are they high?
I got high brush, low brush, and right now I've got cedar and Bohemian waxwings, goldfinch, robins, having a feast and leaving blueberry stains all over my porch and the car. But I have frozen quite a few blueberries this year, thank goodness, because I haven't had the cedar waxwing flock that I had 3 years ago, where they came in 2 days, took all the blueberries, and I got 1 container of blueberries that year. But yeah, lakes, look around, there's some people like lawns, and what do they, if they want a lawn, they want it nice and green, so they're going to put fertilizer on it. And I think most people don't realize, like Miracle-Gro, a pound of that will create roughly 600 pounds of algae in the water.
Well, they do make lawn fertilizer that doesn't have phosphorus
right,
in it.
In the state of Maine, you can't have it. Because I know I was talking to a father last week on Porter Lake, New Vineyard, that he liked a certain type of fertilizer, and he couldn't get it here in the state of Maine.
So he brought it in, probably.
He probably brought it in. I didn't ask him that. But even though, you see a lot of the houses that are close to the water, most of those are fairly old. And then you also got to remember, septic systems. I've dug up some septic systems that were 50-gallon drums with rocks and sand in it. Because back then, people, when they came up to Maine for the summer, not a lot of usage. Most didn't have a dishwasher or a washing machine. They were lucky to have a shower. Most people just went in the lake and just... Because the camp I inherited was built in 1917, and it's a compound, and each building has their own septic, and I've had to combine some of the old septics that were just big old stone things in the ground. I've created new, so there's no leaching going on out into the water. Since one of my cabins, if it's a high spring, there's water underneath the cabin. That's how close it is.
Today's show has been taking place on board the Melinda Ann, a 30-foot floating classroom of the Maine Lake Society. If you're interested in getting lake smart, you'll be amazed at all the things you can do to keep your lake healthy. Look it up at MaineLakesSociety.org. MaineLakesSociety.org. Next weekend is a busy weekend. We're doing an all-day boat trip to see lighthouses from the water. And it's Maine Open Lighthouse Day to see lighthouses from the land. And even see everything from the lighthouse. Whatever you were planning to do next weekend, you may want to change those plans after you hear these plans. When Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine resumes in a moment, this is Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. Two big things are happening next Saturday. It's Maine Open Lighthouse Day. 22 lighthouses are going to be open to the public. We'll get to that in a moment, and we'll tell you which ones. But also next Saturday, we're going to look at 10 of them from the water. This show is going to climb on board a big whale-watching catamaran. Bar Harbor Whale Watch is going to do something no one has ever done before. I'll be one of the hosts. We're going from Bar Harbor, south around Stonington, up past the bridge in Deer Isle, up to Bucksport, under the Penobscot Narrows Bridge, past Fort Knox, and all the way up the Penobscot to Bangor. We'll pass 10 lighthouses on the way. I asked Chief Naturalist Zach Cliver about that earlier this summer.
We're always coming up with something new, and this year we've decided to do a Bar Harbor to Bangor trip up the Penobscot River, get to Bangor and have lunch delivered or to the boat in Bangor, and along the way we're going to visit 10 lighthouses. We're going to have the Castine Historical Society on board, the Friends of Fort Knox on board, and of course you'll be our host. So we'll have all the bases covered. We're hoping the Penobscot Restoration Trust will be on board that have done so much wonderful work to open up the Penobscot. So it's going to be a fantastic trip. I've never personally gone up the Penobscot, so I'm really excited to do it.
Is it going to be an all-day thing, half-day? How do you, well, I mean, that's a bit of a distance to get around from Bar Harbor where you're docked up the river.
Yeah, it's about 140 miles, and we think it's going to take the whole thing about eight and a half hours.
Yeah.
It's our boat is a jet powered catamaran. It's big, it's comfortable, and it can go 30 miles an hour. So we're not going to go fast the whole time, but when we want to, we can.
Well, that boat can lay rubber.
Yeah.
That's the fast boat. So how fast will they let you go upriver? Do you have anyone told you how fast you're allowed to go?
Well, the interesting thing is when that boat is up to speed, it actually throws less of a wake than if you run it at half speed. And then the boat sits down in the water. So I assume that we'll do whatever we need to. If there's other boats on the water, of course the captains are going to slow down. But it's probably better for us. Of course we also don't want to race up the river, so we want to see it. We want people to enjoy it. So
if there are other boats in the river, they're all going to say, "What the hell?
What is that doing here?
Are they lost?"
Absolutely.
Well, that's going to be a real capstone to the summer. September 10th, Bar Harbor Whale Watch, day-long event that'll go by 10 lighthouses and then up the Penobscot River to Bangor. If you want to join me in that trip next weekend, all the info is online at barharborwales.com. barharborwales.com. Also coming next Saturday, it's Maine Open Lighthouse Day. 22 lighthouses from Kittery to Lubec will be open to the public, including some famous ones in our area. 2 of them are among the most photographed lighthouses in Maine. The Candy Stripe Lighthouse at Quoddy Head State Park in Lubec and Bass Harbor Headlight on MDI. Other close ones to the Bangor area, the Fort Point Lighthouse in the State Park in Stockton Springs and Dice Head Lighthouse in Castine. Here's a convenient twofer. The Rockland Breakwater Lighthouse is on one side of Rockland Harbor. The Owl's Head Lighthouse is on the other side, and it's not a long drive between them. There are some offshore lighthouses that you would have to visit by boat, though some of those are close enough to kayak. For most of the lighthouses, open house tours will be 9 to 3. You can get the full list and schedule from the American Lighthouse Foundation. The web address is lighthousefoundation.org. lighthousefoundation.org. When you're there, go to the events page. Plan on learning stuff about this. For instance, one of the big breakthroughs in making lighthouses more effective was the development of lenses that magnified and focused the light so that mariners could see it better. Fresnel lenses come in many sizes. Many of Maine's are fourth-order Fresnel lenses. About 3 years ago, I called up the Maine Lighthouse Museum, and I asked, what is a fourth-order Fresnel lens?
The fourth order is the medium size. Of course, the largest one is 1, and 6 is the smallest. And it's size and plane where you can see it in the ocean.
Okay, so a Fresnel lens basically is just a way they cut the glass in such a way as to refract the light to make it brighter at a distance.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Apparently all that education wasn't completely wasted on me.
That's right, absolutely.
Hey, if you go visit a lighthouse next weekend, you may learn some other stuff, like lighthouses blink at different rates so that sailors can tell them apart in the distance. Last reminder, we'll be looking at 10 lighthouses from the deck of the Bar Harbor Whale Watch boat next weekend as we cruise around from Bar Harbor to Bangor on a day-long boat trip that will cap off a fabulous summer of adventure in Maine. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Bar Harbor Whale Watch, Hammond Lumber, Doors Equipment, Napa Auto Parts, EBS, and a Supercuts location near you. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine returns next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 8. And remember, all shows are archived at 929theticket.com. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.